Sarah Martinez walked through the tall glass doors of Whitmore Industries every morning at exactly 7:45 a.m. She carried her old brown bag with her lunch inside and wore the same three outfits in rotation. Her shoes were clean but old, and her hair was always pulled back in a simple ponytail. She had been working at the company for 8 months now, and every day felt like a test she was not sure she was passing. The building was huge and made of glass and steel. Everything inside was expensive and shiny. The floors were made of marble that reflected the lights above. The walls had expensive paintings that Sarah did not understand. The chairs in the waiting area cost more money than Sarah made in a month. This was not her world, but she needed this job. Sarah worked on the 15th floor in a small office with no windows. Her desk was old and had scratches on it. She had a computer that was slow and a phone that barely worked. But Sarah did not complain. She was happy to have a job at such a big company. Her parents had worked in factories their whole lives. Her father cleaned buildings at night, and her mother worked in a kitchen at a school. Sarah was the first person in her family to go to college, and this job meant everything to her. Every morning, Sarah would see the rich people who worked on the higher floors. They wore expensive suits and carried leather bags. The women had perfect hair and wore jewelry that sparkled. The men had watches that cost more than Sarah's car. They talked about vacations to places Sarah had only seen in movies. They complained about problems that Sarah wished she had. Victoria Whitmore was the boss of the whole company. Her family had owned the business for 50 years. She was 45 years old and had never worked anywhere else. Victoria had grown up with money and had gone to the best schools. She lived in a big house and drove a car that cost more than most people's homes. Victoria expected everyone to treat her like a queen, and most people did. From the first day Sarah started working, Victoria did not like her. Sarah could not understand why. She worked hard and never caused trouble. She came to work early and stayed late. She did everything her boss asked her to do. But Victoria always found something wrong with Sarah's work. She would call Sarah into her office and point out small mistakes. She would talk to Sarah like she was stupid. "Sarah, this report has a spelling error," Victoria would say in front of other people. "Did you even go to school? This is not how we do things here." Sarah's face would turn red, but she would just say, "I'm sorry, Mrs. Whitmore. I will fix it right away." Victoria would also make comments about Sarah's clothes. "Sarah, that dress looks like it came from a discount store. You represent this company now. You need to look the part." Sarah wanted to say that she bought her clothes at discount stores because that was all she could afford. But she needed this job, so she said nothing. The other workers at the company were different from Sarah, too. Most of them had grown up with money. They had gone to expensive colleges and had parents who knew important people. They talked about things Sarah did not understand. They made jokes about poor people and laughed about things that hurt Sarah's feelings. During lunch, the other workers would go to expensive restaurants. Sarah would eat her sandwich at her desk and work. She told herself it was better this way because she could get more work done. But the truth was that she felt out of place with the other workers. They made her feel small and stupid. Sarah's best friend at work was Maria, who cleaned the offices at night. Maria was from Mexico and had 3 children. She worked 2 jobs to pay for her family's needs. Sarah and Maria would sometimes talk when Maria was cleaning Sarah's office. They understood each other because they both knew what it was like to struggle for money. "That woman is mean to you," Maria would say about Victoria. "She thinks she is better than everyone else because she has money. I just need to work harder," Sarah would reply. "Maybe she will start to like me," Maria would shake her head. "Some people will never like you no matter what you do. They think money makes them better than other people." Sarah knew Maria was right, but she did not want to believe it. Sarah had always thought that if she worked hard enough, she could earn respect. Her parents had taught her that hard work was the most important thing. But at Whitmore Industries, it seemed like where you came from mattered more than how hard you worked. Every day, Victoria found new ways to make Sarah feel bad. She would give Sarah extra work right before Sarah was supposed to go home. She would call Sarah into meetings just to embarrass her in front of other people. She would make Sarah do tasks that were not part of her job, like getting coffee for important clients or cleaning up after meetings. "Sarah, the coffee machine is broken," Victoria would say. "Go to the store and buy coffee for everyone. Use your own money and we will pay you back later." Victoria never paid Sarah back. Sarah's apartment was small and cheap. She lived in a neighborhood that was not very safe, but it was all she could afford. Her apartment had one bedroom, a tiny kitchen, and a bathroom with a shower that barely worked. The walls were thin, and she could hear her neighbors arguing. The heat did not work very well in winter, and the air conditioning did not work at all in summer. But Sarah's apartment had one thing that made her happy. In the corner of her living room sat an old piano. It was the only expensive thing Sarah owned, and it was not really hers. The piano had belonged to her grandmother, who had died 2 years ago. Sarah's grandmother had been a piano teacher, and she had taught Sarah to play when Sarah was little. Sarah had not played the piano in years. She was too busy with work and too tired when she got home. The piano was covered with dust and had some keys that did not work properly. But sometimes, late at night when she could not sleep, Sarah would sit at the piano and remember the songs her grandmother had taught her. She would touch the keys softly so the neighbors would not hear. Sarah's life was simple but hard. She worked long hours for people who did not respect her. She lived in a place that was not very nice and ate food that was cheap. But she told herself that things would get better. She believed that if she worked hard enough and was patient enough, she would prove that she belonged at Whitmore Industries. She had no idea that everything was about to change in a way she never expected. The invitation came on expensive paper with gold letters. Sarah found it on her desk one Monday morning. It was for the company's yearly charity party at Victoria Whitmore's house. The party was in 2 weeks, and it was supposed to raise money for children who did not have homes. Sarah had heard about this party from other workers. It was a big event where rich people came to eat expensive food and feel good about giving money to help poor children. Sarah was surprised to get an invitation. She was just a low-level worker, and usually only the important people got invited to Victoria's house. Sarah read the invitation 3 times to make sure it was really for her. At the bottom there was a small note written by hand. All staff required to attend and assist with event duties. Sarah's heart sank when she read those words. This was not really an invitation. Victoria wanted Sarah to work at the party, not enjoy it as a guest. Sarah would probably have to serve drinks or clean up while the rich people had fun. But Sarah could not say no. Victoria was her boss, and saying no could mean losing her job. The next 2 weeks were busy for Sarah. Victoria gave her extra work to prepare for the party. Sarah had to call the catering company, check on the flower arrangements, and make sure everything was perfect. Victoria was more mean than usual during this time. She yelled at Sarah for small mistakes and made her redo work that was already good. "This is not right, Sarah," Victoria would say, throwing papers on Sarah's desk. "Do you want to embarrass me in front of my guests? Important people are coming to this party. Everything must be perfect." Sarah worked late every night to make sure everything was ready. She was tired and stressed, but she told herself it would be over soon. Maybe after the party, Victoria would see how hard Sarah worked and start to treat her better. The day of the party, Sarah had to go to Victoria's house early to help set up. Victoria lived in the richest part of the city in a house that looked like a palace. The house was huge and white with tall columns in front. There was a long driveway with perfect grass on both sides. The house had more rooms than Sarah could count, and each room was filled with expensive furniture and art. Sarah had never seen anything like it. Her whole apartment could fit in Victoria's living room. The kitchen was bigger than most restaurants, with shiny appliances that looked like they had never been used. There were bathrooms with gold faucets and mirrors with special lights around them. Every room had flowers that cost more money than Sarah made in a week, but the most beautiful room in the house was the ballroom. It was a huge room with a ceiling that was very high and windows that went from the floor to the top of the wall. There were crystal lights hanging from the ceiling that made rainbow colors on the walls. The floor was made of wood that was so shiny it looked like a mirror. And in the corner of the room sat a beautiful black piano. Sarah stopped when she saw the piano. It was the most beautiful instrument she had ever seen. It was much bigger and nicer than her grandmother's old piano. The wood was perfect and shiny, and all the keys were white and clean. Sarah wanted to touch it, but she was afraid to get too close. This piano probably cost more money than Sarah would make in her whole life. Victoria found Sarah looking at the piano. "Don't even think about touching that," Victoria said in a sharp voice. "That piano is worth more than you make in 10 years. It belonged to my great-grandmother, who was a famous musician in Europe. Only real musicians are allowed to play it." Sarah nodded and moved away from the piano. She spent the rest of the day helping to set up tables and chairs, arranging flowers, and making sure everything looked perfect. The catering people brought in expensive food and wine. Sarah's stomach made noise because she had not eaten lunch, but she was too busy to take a break. As the evening started, the guests began to arrive. Sarah had never seen so many rich people in one place. The men wore expensive suits with bow ties, and the women wore long dresses with jewelry that sparkled like stars. They arrived in cars that cost more than most people's houses. Some even came in long cars with drivers. Sarah was given a uniform to wear. It was a black dress with a white apron like a maid's outfit. Sarah felt embarrassed to wear it, but she had no choice. Her job was to walk around with a tray of drinks and offer them to the guests. She also had to take their coats and hang them up. The guests treated Sarah like she was invisible. They would take drinks from her tray without saying thank you or even looking at her face. Some of them were rude and demanded things like she was their servant. Sarah tried to smile and be polite, but inside she felt hurt and angry. Victoria was in her element at the party. She wore a long red dress that probably cost more than Sarah's car. Her hair was done perfectly, and she wore diamonds around her neck. She moved through the crowd like a queen, talking and laughing with her rich friends. Everyone wanted to talk to Victoria and tell her how beautiful her house was. Sarah watched Victoria from across the room as she served drinks. Victoria looked so confident and happy. She belonged in this world of expensive things and important people. Sarah felt like an alien who had landed on a different planet. Everything here was foreign to her. The way people talked, the food they ate, the jokes they made. As the night went on, Victoria drank more wine and became louder. She started telling stories about her employees to entertain her guests. Sarah could hear Victoria's voice getting higher as she laughed about the funny people who worked for her. "You should see some of the people I have to deal with at work," Victoria said to a group of her friends. "They come from such different backgrounds. It's amusing to watch them try to fit in with civilized society." Sarah felt her face get hot with anger. She knew Victoria was talking about her and other workers like Maria, but Sarah had to keep working. She could not say anything or show her feelings. She needed this job too much. The party went on for hours. Sarah's feet hurt from walking around in uncomfortable shoes. Her arms were tired from carrying heavy trays. She had not eaten anything all day, and she felt weak and dizzy, but she could not stop working. Victoria was watching her and waiting for her to make a mistake. As the night got later, some of the guests had drunk too much wine. They became louder and more rude. One man grabbed Sarah's arm when she was serving drinks and made a comment about how pretty she was. Sarah pulled away and tried to keep working, but she felt uncomfortable and scared. Victoria saw what happened, but instead of helping Sarah, she smiled. Victoria seemed to enjoy watching Sarah struggle. It was like a game to her, seeing how much she could make Sarah suffer before Sarah would break. Sarah did not know that this was all part of Victoria's plan. Victoria had been thinking about how to embarrass Sarah in front of all these important people. Victoria wanted to show her guests that she had power over people like Sarah. She wanted to prove that people from Sarah's background did not belong in her world. Victoria had noticed Sarah looking at the piano earlier, and an idea had formed in her mind. Victoria thought it would be funny to make Sarah try to play the piano in front of everyone. Victoria was sure that Sarah knew nothing about music and would embarrass herself. It would be the perfect way to put Sarah in her place and entertain. The guests at the same time. Victoria did not know about Sarah's secret past with music. She did not know about Sarah's grandmother or the old piano in Sarah's apartment. Victoria thought she knew everything about Sarah, but she was about to learn that some people have hidden depths that cannot be seen on the surface. As the party reached its peak and all the guests were gathered in the ballroom, Victoria decided it was time to put her cruel plan into action. The ballroom was full of people talking and laughing. The sound of their voices mixed with the soft music playing from hidden speakers. Sarah was carrying a tray of empty glasses to the kitchen when she heard Victoria's voice rise above all the other sounds. "Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please?" Victoria called out, tapping her wine glass with a silver spoon. The sound rang through the room like a bell. Slowly, all the conversations stopped. The guests turned to look at Victoria, who was standing near the beautiful black piano. She had a big smile on her face, but Sarah could see something mean in her eyes. Sarah felt a cold feeling in her stomach, like something bad was about to happen. "Thank you all for coming tonight to support our charity," Victoria continued. "As you know, we are here to help children who have no homes. But before we finish the evening, I thought we should have some entertainment." The guests clapped and made sounds of approval. They seemed excited to see what Victoria had planned. Sarah tried to move toward the kitchen, hoping to disappear before Victoria noticed her. But it was too late. "Sarah," Victoria called out in a loud voice. "Sarah Martinez, come here, please." Everyone in the room turned to look at Sarah. She felt like a spotlight was shining on her. Her face turned red and her hands started to shake. She wanted to run away, but her feet would not move. All these rich, important people were staring at her in her maid's uniform. "Come on, don't be shy," Victoria said with a fake sweet voice. "Sarah works for me at the company. She's one of our newer employees." Sarah walked slowly toward Victoria. Each step felt like it took forever. The guests were all watching her with curious eyes. Some of them whispered to each other. Sarah could hear bits of their conversations. "Who is that girl?" "She's the help, I think. What is Victoria doing?" When Sarah reached Victoria, her boss put a hand on her shoulder. Victoria's grip was tight, and Sarah could smell the wine on her breath. "Sarah here has been working so hard tonight, serving all of you wonderful people," Victoria announced to the room. "I thought it would be nice to give her a chance to showcase her talents." Victoria turned to look at the piano with exaggerated surprise, as if she had just noticed it was there. "Oh, look! My great-grandmother's piano. Sarah, I bet someone from your ground must have some musical abilities. Why don't you play something for our guests?" The room went completely silent. Sarah felt like she could not breathe. She looked at the piano and then at all the faces staring at her. These people expected her to fail. They expected her to embarrass herself so they could feel superior. I don't know if I should," Sarah said quietly. "Nonsense," Victoria said loudly. "I insist. Everyone would love to hear you play." "Wouldn't you, everyone?" Some of the guests made polite sounds of agreement, but Sarah could tell they were just being nice. They thought this would be funny. They thought watching a poor girl embarrass herself would be entertaining. Sarah looked around the room desperately. She saw Maria in the corner, cleaning up some spilled food. Maria's eyes were full of sympathy, but she could not help Sarah. Sarah was trapped. "Really, Mrs. Whitmore, I think I should get back to work." Sarah tried again, but Victoria was not going to let her escape. "I won't take no for an answer. Besides, these people paid good money to be here tonight. The least we can do is provide some entertainment, even if it's amateur." The way Victoria said the word amateur made it sound like an insult. Sarah knew that Victoria expected her to sit at the piano and maybe play Happy Birthday badly, or admit that she could not play at all. Either way, Victoria would get what she wanted. Sarah would be embarrassed in front of all these important people. Sarah's mind raced. She thought about her job and how much she needed it. She thought about her parents and how proud they were that she worked at such a fancy company. If she refused to play, Victoria might fire her. If she tried to play and did badly, Victoria would have a reason to fire her anyway. But then Sarah thought about her grandmother, Elena, had been a proud woman who never let anyone make her feel small. Elena had taught Sarah that music was a gift, not something to be ashamed of. Elena always said that when you play music, you share a piece of your soul with the world. Sarah walked slowly to the piano bench. Her legs felt weak and her hands were shaking. She could hear some of the guests making quiet comments. This should be interesting. Poor girl, she looks terrified. Victoria can be so cruel sometimes. Sarah sat down on the piano bench. It was made of the same shiny black wood as the piano. The seat was soft and comfortable, much nicer than the old wooden chair at her grandmother's piano. Sarah looked at the keys. They were perfect and white, without any scratches or stains. She placed her hands on the keys but did not press them yet. The room was so quiet she could hear people breathing. Victoria stood nearby with her arms crossed, waiting for Sarah to make a fool of herself. Sarah closed her eyes and tried to remember what her grandmother had taught her. Music comes from the heart, Elena used to say. Don't think about the people watching. Think about the feeling you want to share. Sarah took a deep breath. She thought about all the times Victoria had been mean to her. She thought about all the nights she had worked late while Victoria went home early. She thought about how these rich people looked at her like she was nothing. All of that pain and anger and sadness was inside her, waiting to come out. But she also thought about her grandmother's gentle hands guiding hers across the keys. She thought about the love in Elena's voice when she sang along to Sarah's playing. She thought about how music had always been the one thing that made Sarah feel special and important. Sarah opened her eyes and looked at the keys one more time. Then she began to play. The first notes came out soft and sweet. Sarah started with a simple melody that her grandmother had taught her when she was very young. But as her fingers remembered the feeling of the keys, the music grew stronger and more complex. Sarah had not played piano in almost 3 years, but her fingers remembered everything. They moved across the keys like they had never stopped playing. The music filled the huge ballroom, bouncing off the high ceiling and the crystal lights. The guests stopped whispering. They stopped making any noise at all. Even Victoria's mouth fell open in surprise. The music was not what anyone had expected. Sarah forgot about the people watching her. She forgot about Victoria and her mean comments. She forgot about her uniform and her embarrassment. There was only the music and the feeling of coming home. As she played, Sarah felt her grandmother's presence beside her. She could almost hear Elena's voice encouraging her. "That's my girl," Elena seemed to whisper. "Show them what you can do." The song Sarah was playing was called Ballade No. 1 in G minor by a famous composer named Chopin. It was one of the most difficult pieces Elena had ever taught her. Sarah had practiced it for months when she was 17, dreaming of playing it in a concert hall someday. Now, 8 years later, in Victoria Whitmore's ballroom, Sarah played it perfectly. Every note was clear and strong. Every emotion came through in the music. The sad parts made people want to cry. The angry parts made their hearts beat faster. The beautiful parts made them forget about everything else in the world. Sarah played for 4 minutes, but it felt like no time at all. When the last note faded away, the silence in the room was complete. Nobody moved, nobody breathed. They were all stunned by what they had just heard. Then, slowly, one person started clapping, then another, then another. Soon the whole room was clapping so hard it sounded like thunder. Some people were wiping tears from their eyes. Others were shaking their heads in amazement. Sarah sat at the piano, her hands still on the keys. She could not believe what had just happened. She had played in front of all these people, and they loved it. They were clapping for her, not because they felt sorry for her, but because she had given them something beautiful. Victoria stood frozen beside the piano. Her plan had completely backfired. Instead of embarrassing Sarah, she had revealed that Sarah was incredibly talented. The guests were not laughing at Sarah. They were amazed by her. Sarah slowly stood up from the piano bench. The clapping continued, growing even louder. Some of the guests were standing up now, giving her what her grandmother had called a standing ovation. As Sarah looked out at all the faces in the crowd, she saw something she had never seen before. These rich, important people were looking at her with respect. They were seeing her as a person with real talent, not just a poor girl who served them drinks. For the first time since she had started working at Whitmore Industries, Sarah felt like she belonged somewhere. Not because of her job or her clothes, or where she came from, but because of the music inside her that no one could take away. As the clapping slowly stopped, Sarah's mind filled with memories she had tried to forget. The beautiful music she had just played brought back so many feelings from her past. She remembered being 7 years old and standing on a small stool to reach the piano keys in her grandmother's tiny apartment. Elena Martinez had come to America from Spain when she was 25 years old. She had been a famous piano player in Madrid, performing in beautiful concert halls for rich and important people. But when she married Sarah's grandfather, she had to leave everything behind and start a new life in a strange country. Sarah's grandmother never talked much about her life in Spain. But sometimes, when she thought Sarah was not listening, Elena would play songs that made her cry. Sarah would peek around the corner and see tears running down her grandmother's face as her fingers moved across the old piano keys. Elena lived above a small music store in the poorest part of the city. The apartment had only 2 rooms, a tiny kitchen and a bedroom where Elena slept on a bed that folded out from the wall. The piano took up most of the space in the main room. It was old and some of the keys stuck, but Elena kept it perfectly clean and tuned. Sarah's parents both worked 2 jobs, so Sarah spent most of her time after school with Elena. Her grandmother would make her do homework first, but then they would sit at the piano together. Elena's hands were old and had wrinkles, but they moved like magic across the keys. Music is not about the piano, Elena would tell Sarah. Music is about what you feel inside. The piano is just a way to let those feelings out so other people can hear them. At first, Sarah could only play simple songs with 1 finger, but Elena was patient. She would put her hands over Sarah's hands and guide them to the right keys. Slowly, Sarah learned to use all her fingers. Then she learned to read the black dots on paper that told her which keys to press. Sarah was a fast learner. By the time she was 10, she could play songs that most adults could not play. Elena was amazed by how quickly Sarah learned new pieces. She said Sarah had a special gift that only came along once in many years. "You have magic in your fingers, Mia," Elena would say, using the Spanish word for my daughter. "God gave you a special talent. You must promise me you will never waste it." When Sarah was 12, Elena entered her in a piano competition for young musicians. Sarah was scared because all the other children came from rich families and had expensive clothes. She wore a simple blue dress that Elena had made for her, and her shoes were old and scuffed, but when Sarah sat at the piano and began to play, none of that mattered. The judges and the audience forgot about her clothes and only heard the beautiful music. Sarah won first place, beating children who had been taking lessons at fancy music schools their whole lives. Elena cried when they announced Sarah's name as the winner. She hugged Sarah so tight that Sarah could barely breathe. "I knew it," Elena whispered. "I knew you were special." After that, Sarah won many more competitions. Local newspapers wrote articles about the talented girl from the poor neighborhood who could play piano like a professional. Music teachers from expensive schools came to Elena's apartment and offered to teach Sarah for free. Elena was proud, but she was also worried. She knew that the music world was hard, especially for people without money. She had learned that lesson herself when she was young. But she also knew that Sarah's talent was too special to ignore. When Sarah was 15, something wonderful happened. A woman from the best music school in the city came to hear Sarah play. Her name was Mrs. Patterson, and she taught only the most talented students. After Sarah played 3 songs, Mrs. Patterson offered her a full scholarship to attend the music school. "Your granddaughter has extraordinary talent," Mrs. Patterson told Elena. "With proper training, she could become a professional concert pianist. She could play in the best concert halls in the world." Elena's eyes filled with tears. This was everything she had dreamed of for Sarah, but the music school was expensive, even with the scholarship. Sarah would need money for books, special clothes for performances, and travel to competitions. Elena worked in the music store downstairs, but she did not make much money. Elena sold her jewelry and worked extra hours to pay for everything Sarah needed. She even sold some of her own music books that she had brought from Spain. Sarah felt guilty about how much money Elena was spending, but Elena would not listen to her complaints. "This is why I came to America," Elena told Sarah. "Not for me, but for you and your children. You will have the chances I never had." Sarah worked harder than any student at the music school. She practiced for hours every day until her fingers were sore and her back ached from sitting at the piano, but she loved every minute of it. Playing music made her feel alive in a way that nothing else did. By the time Sarah was 17, she was one of the best young pianists in the state. She won competitions against students from all over the country. Famous music teachers began to notice her. She received letters from music schools offering her scholarships to study with the best teachers in the world. Elena was prouder than she had ever been in her life. She would sit in the audience at Sarah's concerts and cry with joy as her granddaughter played. All the sacrifice had been worth it to see Sarah's talent bloom, but then everything changed. When Sarah was 18 and ready to graduate from high school, her father got very sick. He could not work anymore, and the family had no money coming in. Sarah's mother had to work even more hours, but it was not enough to pay for rent and food and her father's medicine. Sarah faced an impossible choice. She could accept one of the scholarships to study music at a famous university, or she could go to a regular college and study something that would help her get a job quickly to help her family. Elena begged Sarah to take the music scholarship. "You cannot give up your gift," she said with tears in her eyes. "This is what we have worked for all these years." But Sarah could not watch her family struggle while she pursued her dreams. She knew that studying music would take many years before she could make any money. Her family needed help right away. So Sarah made the hardest decision of her life. She turned down all the music scholarships and went to a local college to study accounting. Accounting was boring, but people who worked with numbers could always find jobs that paid good money. Elena was heartbroken. She stopped playing piano herself and became very quiet. Sarah tried to explain that she was doing this for the family, but Elena felt like Sarah was throwing away the most precious gift anyone could have. Sarah continued to play piano in her free time during college, but it was not the same. She was too busy with her accounting classes and her part-time job to practice seriously. Slowly, she began to play less and less. By the time she graduated from college, she had not touched a piano in months. Elena died 2 years after Sarah graduated. She had been sick for a long time, but she never complained. On her last day, she made Sarah promise to start playing piano again. "The music is still inside you," Elena whispered. "It is waiting for the right time to come out. Promise me you will not let it die." Sarah promised, but after Elena died, she could not bring herself to play. Every time she looked at the old piano in her apartment, she felt guilty and sad. She felt like she had disappointed the person who loved her most. Now, standing in Victoria's ballroom with all these people clapping for her, Sarah felt her grandmother's presence strongly. It was like Elena was standing right beside her, smiling with pride. The music had been sleeping inside Sarah for years, but it had never really gone away. It had just been waiting for the right moment to wake up. Sarah looked out at all the faces in the crowd. These rich people who had ignored her all evening were now looking at her with respect and wonder. They had heard her story through her music. Even though she had not said a word about her past, Victoria stood nearby, her face pale with shock. She had wanted to embarrass Sarah, but instead she had revealed Sarah's greatest secret. The poor girl in the maid's uniform was not just a servant. She was an artist with a gift that money could not buy. As Sarah walked away from the piano, she felt different than she had felt in years. The little girl who had dreamed of playing in concert halls was still alive inside her. Elena's love and sacrifice had not been wasted. The music was still there, as beautiful and powerful as ever, waiting to be shared with the world. The applause seemed to go on forever. Sarah stood next to the piano, not sure what to do with her hands or where to look. She had never performed for so many people before, except in competitions when she was young, but this felt different. These people were not judging her, they were celebrating her. Victoria remained frozen in place, her face showing a mixture of shock and anger. Her perfect plan had completely fallen apart. Instead of humiliating Sarah, she had accidentally revealed that her employee was incredibly talented. Victoria's guests were not laughing at Sarah. They were amazed by her. An older man with gray hair and an expensive suit pushed through the crowd toward Sarah. He walked with confidence, like someone who was used to being important. Sarah recognized him from earlier in the evening. Several people had been trying to talk to him, and Victoria had been especially nice to him. "Excuse me, miss," the man said to Sarah in a kind voice. That was absolutely extraordinary. I haven't heard Chopin played with such emotion in years. Sarah felt her cheeks turn red. "Thank you, sir. That's very kind of you to say." The man reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small white card. "My name is James Chun. I'm a music producer. I work with classical musicians and help them make recordings and find places to perform." Sarah took the card with shaking hands. She could not believe this was happening. This important man wanted to talk to her about music, not about serving drinks or cleaning up. "Where did you learn to play like that?" James asked. "That level of skill and interpretation, you must have studied with some of the best teachers." "My grandmother taught me when I was little," Sarah replied quietly. "She was a pianist in Spain before she came to America." James nodded with understanding. "I thought I heard something special in your playing. There was real feeling there, not just technical skill." "That's very rare, especially in someone so young." Other guests began to gather around Sarah and James. They wanted to know more about the girl who had just given them such a beautiful performance. Sarah felt overwhelmed by all the attention, but also excited. For years, she had hidden her musical talent. Now, suddenly, everyone wanted to know about it. "Have you recorded any music?" asked a woman with diamonds around her neck. "Do you perform regularly?" asked another man. "Are you planning to give concerts?" asked someone else. Sarah did not know how to answer all these questions. She looked around nervously and saw Victoria watching from across the room. Victoria's face was full of anger, and Sarah could tell her boss was not happy about what was happening. "Actually," Sarah said to the crowd, "I work in accounting. I don't really perform anymore." The people looked confused. James Chun shook his head like he could not believe what he was hearing. "That's impossible," James said. "Someone with your talent should be sharing it with the world. You could be performing in concert halls, making recordings, teaching master classes." "I had to choose a more practical career," Sarah explained. "My family needed money, and music takes a long time before you can make a living from it." James looked sad when he heard this. "I understand the practical concerns, but talent like yours is so rare. It seems like a waste to hide it in an office." Victoria had heard enough. She walked over to where Sarah was standing with all the guests. Victoria's face was smiling, but her eyes were cold and angry. "Well, this has been very entertaining," Victoria said in a voice that sounded sweet but felt dangerous. "But Sarah needs to get back to work. These glasses won't clean themselves." James Chen looked at Victoria with surprise. "This young woman is working as a server tonight? But she's clearly a trained classical pianist." "Sarah works for my company," Victoria said, putting a possessive hand on Sarah's shoulder. "She's our junior accountant. Playing piano is just her little hobby." The way Victoria said "little hobby" made it sound unimportant and silly. Sarah felt the familiar shame creeping back. For a few minutes she had felt special and valuable. Now Victoria was reminding everyone that Sarah was just the help, but James Chun was not impressed by Victoria's attitude. He had been in the music business for 30 years, and he knew talent when he heard it. He also knew how some wealthy people treated artists, especially those from poor backgrounds. "With respect, Mrs. Whitmore," James said firmly, "what I just heard was not a hobby. That was professional level artistry. This young woman has a gift that should be nurtured, not hidden away in an accounting office. Other guests nodded in agreement. They had been moved by Sarah's performance, and they did not like seeing Victoria try to diminish it. Some of them had children who took music lessons, and they knew how much work it took to play at Sarah's level. Victoria's smile became more forced. She was not used to people disagreeing with her, especially in her own house. But she could not be openly rude to James Chun. He was too important and well-connected. "Of course Sarah is talented," Victoria said through gritted teeth. "But we all have to be practical about our careers. Not everyone can make a living playing piano." "Actually," said a woman in a blue dress, "my daughter takes piano lessons, and her teacher charges $200 per hour. Good music teachers make excellent money. And concert pianists can earn thousands for a single performance," added another guest. Sarah listened to this conversation with growing amazement. She had always been told that music was not a practical career choice. But these people seemed to think it was possible to make a good living from playing piano. James Chun pulled out his phone and showed Sarah something on the screen. "Look, there's a video of tonight's performance. Someone was recording you." Sarah saw herself sitting at the piano, her fingers moving across the keys. The sound quality was not perfect, but you could still hear how beautiful the music was. At the bottom of the screen, Sarah could see that people were already commenting on the video. "Amazing! Who is this girl? I got chills listening to this. She should be performing professionally." "This video already has 500 views and it was just posted 10 minutes ago," James said. "By tomorrow, thousands of people will have heard your music." Victoria looked at the phone screen with horror. She realized that this situation was spinning completely out of her control. Her plan to embarrass Sarah had backfired so badly that Sarah was becoming famous on the internet. "I think that's enough excitement for one evening," Victoria said, trying to regain control. Sarah really does need to get back to work now. But the guests were not ready to let Sarah go. They wanted to talk to her more about music, to ask her about her background and her training. Some of them had pulled out their own phones and were taking pictures with Sarah. James Chun was not going to let Victoria shut down this conversation. He had discovered something special tonight, and he was not going to let it slip away. "Sarah," he said, "I would like to offer you something. I have connections with several symphony orchestras and concert halls. I think I could arrange for you to audition for some performance opportunities." Sarah's heart started beating fast. This was what she had dreamed about when she was young, the chance to perform her music for large audiences. But she also thought about her job and her responsibilities. "I don't know," Sarah said quietly. "I have to work. I need my job." "What if I told you that you could make more money from one concert than you make in a month at your regular job?" James asked. Sarah looked at Victoria, who was now openly glaring at her. Sarah knew that Victoria would not be happy if Sarah started pursuing music on the side. Victoria liked to control her employees completely, but Sarah also thought about her grandmother Elena and the promise she had made. Elena had sacrificed everything to give Sarah the gift of music. Maybe it was time to honor that sacrifice. "I would like to hear more about these opportunities," Sarah said to James. Victoria's face turned red with anger. "Sarah, we need to discuss this later. You have responsibilities to the company." "Of course," Sarah said politely. "But I think I'm allowed to have interests outside of work." James Chun smiled. He could see that Sarah was braver than she had seemed at first. "Why don't you call me tomorrow? We can discuss some possibilities." As the evening continued, more and more guests came to talk to Sarah. Word had spread throughout the party about her incredible performance. People wanted to hear her story and compliment her playing. For the first time in months, Sarah felt valued and respected. Victoria watched all of this with growing rage. Her perfect party had been ruined by the girl she had wanted to humiliate. Instead of putting Sarah in her place, Victoria had accidentally launched Sarah's musical career. As the guests began to leave, many of them stopped to shake Sarah's hand and tell her how much they had enjoyed her music. Some of them gave her their contact information and asked her to let them know when she would be performing again. Sarah felt like she was living in a dream. A few hours ago, she had been invisible to these people. Now they were treating her like a star. The music had changed everything, just like her grandmother had always said it would. But Sarah also knew that Victoria would not forgive this embarrassing turn of events. As Sarah cleaned up the glasses and plates after the party, she could feel Victoria's angry eyes watching her every move. Sarah had won the battle tonight, but the war with her boss was just beginning. The next morning, Sarah woke up thinking the whole evening had been a dream. But when she looked at her knitstand, she saw James Chun's business card sitting there. Next to it was her phone, which had been buzzing with notifications all night. Sarah picked up her phone and could not believe what she saw. The video of her playing piano at Victoria's party had been shared hundreds of times on social media. People were commenting and asking questions about who she was and where they could hear more of her music. Some of the comments made Sarah's eyes fill with tears. "This gave me chills. Such beautiful playing. I haven't heard Chopin played with such emotion in years. This girl is incredibly talented. She should be performing professionally. I would pay good money to hear her play in concert." But there were also comments that worried Sarah. Is this the same company that treats its employees badly? I heard the boss was trying to embarrass this girl. This looks like workplace harassment to me. Sarah got ready for work with a nervous feeling in her stomach. She did not know what Victoria would say about everything that had happened. As she walked into the office building, Sarah noticed that people were looking at her differently. Some of her coworkers smiled and nodded at her. Others whispered to each other when she passed by. When Sarah got to her desk, she found a note telling her to come to Victoria's office immediately. Sarah's hands shook as she walked down the hallway. She knocked on Victoria's door and heard her boss's cold voice telling her to come in. Victoria was sitting behind her big desk, looking at her computer screen. She did not look up when Sarah entered the room. The silence went on for a long time, making Sarah more and more nervous. Finally, Victoria looked up. Her face was calm, but her eyes were full of anger. "Sit down, Sarah," Victoria said in a quiet voice that was somehow more scary than yelling. Sarah sat in the chair across from Victoria's desk. She tried to keep her hands steady and her face calm. "I hope you enjoyed yourself last night," Victoria said. "It seems you made quite an impression on my guests." "I'm sorry if I did anything wrong, Mrs. Whitmore. You asked me to play, so I played." Victoria's smile was cold and mean. "Oh, you didn't do anything wrong, Sarah. In fact, you did exactly what I expected you to do. You showed everyone exactly what kind of person you are." Sarah did not understand what Victoria meant, but she could tell it was not good. "You see, Sarah, I know your type," Victoria continued. "You pretend to be humble and hardworking, but really you're just looking for attention. Last night proved that. The moment you got a chance to show off, you took it." "That's not true," Sarah said quietly. "I didn't want to play. You made me. I gave you an opportunity, and you used it to make me look bad in front of my friends." Victoria said, her voice getting louder. "Do you have any idea how embarrassing it was for me? My guests are probably talking about how I didn't know my own employee was some kind of piano genius." Sarah realized that Victoria was not angry because Sarah had played badly. She was angry because Sarah had played too well. Victoria had wanted Sarah to fail, and when Sarah succeeded instead, it made Victoria look foolish. "I'm sorry you feel embarrassed," Sarah said. "I didn't mean for that to happen." "Oh, but you did," Victoria said, standing up and walking around her desk. "You planned this whole thing. You probably knew that James Chun would be there. You probably practiced that song for weeks, waiting for your chance to perform." This was completely untrue, but Sarah could see that Victoria believed it. In Victoria's mind, Sarah was not a talented person who had been put in an uncomfortable situation. Sarah was a sneaky employee who had tricked Victoria into giving her a chance to show off. "Mrs. Whitmore, I hadn't played piano in years before. Last night, I was as surprised as anyone when I remembered how to play that song." "Don't lie to me, Sarah," Victoria said angrily. I know exactly what you are. You're one of those people who thinks they're too good for the job they have. You think you deserve better than working for me. Victoria walked closer to Sarah's chair. Well, let me tell you something. I don't care how well you can play piano. You work for me, and that means you do what I tell you to do. If I want you to serve drinks, you serve drinks. If I want you to clean toilets, you clean toilets. Your little piano tricks don't change anything. Sarah felt her face getting hot with anger, but she tried to stay calm. I understand that I work for you, Mrs. Whitmore. I've always done my job well. Have you? Victoria asked. Because it seems to me like you've been hiding things from me. How do I know what other secrets you're keeping? How do I know I can trust you? This was so unfair that Sarah almost started crying. She had never lied to Victoria or hidden anything from her. Sarah had simply never mentioned that she could play piano because it had nothing to do with her job. Victoria went back to her desk and sat down. I've been thinking about your position here at the company, Sarah. I'm not sure you're a good fit for our culture. Sarah's heart sank. Victoria was going to fire her. All because Sarah had played piano when Victoria told her to. Please don't fire me, Sarah said. I need this job. I'll do anything you want. Victoria smiled, but it was not a kind smile. I'm not firing you yet, Sarah, but things are going to change around here. I'm going to be watching you very carefully. Any mistakes, any problems, any signs that you're not completely focused on your work and you're gone? Sarah nodded, even though she felt sick inside. Victoria was going to make her life miserable until she found an excuse to fire her. And another thing, Victoria continued. I don't want to hear anything more about piano playing or music or any of that nonsense. You're an accountant, not a performer. If I find out you're wasting time on musical activities instead of focusing on your job, there will be consequences. Sarah felt like Victoria was trying to kill the most important part of her, but she needed this job, so she nodded again. You can go now, Victoria said, turning back to her computer. And Sarah, close the door behind you. I don't want to be disturbed. Sarah left Victoria's office feeling worse than she had felt in months. Victoria was going to punish her for being talented. Sarah was trapped between needing her job and wanting to explore the musical opportunities that James Chin had offered her. As Sarah walked back to her desk, she saw that several of her coworkers were looking at their phones and whispering. When they saw her coming, they quickly put their phones away and pretended to work. Sarah sat down at her desk and tried to focus on her accounting work, but she could not concentrate. She kept thinking about James Chin's offer and about the video of her playing that was spreading across the internet. Around lunchtime, Sarah's phone rang. She almost did not answer it because she did not recognize the number, but something made her pick it up. Double quote, "Hello, is this Sarah Martinez?" asked a man's voice. Yes, this is Sarah. My name is Michael Torres. I'm a music reporter for the city newspaper. I saw the video of you playing piano last night, and I'd like to write a story about you. Sarah's heart started beating fast. A story about me? Yes, I think our readers would be very interested to learn about your background and your musical training. It's not every day we discover a hidden talent like yours. Sarah looked around the office to make sure no one was listening. I don't know if I should do an interview. I work for a company and my boss might not like the publicity. I understand your concerns, Michael said, but I think people deserve to know your story. From what I've heard, you're incredibly talented, but you've been working in accounting instead of pursuing music. That's a story that could inspire a lot of people. Sarah thought about her grandmother Elena and how proud she would be to see Sarah's name in the newspaper for her musical talent. But she also thought about Victoria's threats. Can I think about it and call you back? Sarah asked. Of course, Michael said. But I should tell you I'm not the only reporter who's interested. This story is going to be written by someone. Wouldn't you rather have a chance to tell your side of it? After Sarah hung up the phone, she sat staring at her computer screen. Everything was happening so fast. Yesterday, she had been invisible. Today, reporters wanted to interview her and music producers wanted to work with her. But Sarah also knew that Victoria would not make this easy for her. Her boss would do everything possible to stop Sarah from pursuing music. Victoria wanted Sarah to stay small and invisible, serving drinks and doing accounting work. Sarah looked at James Chin's business card again. Then she looked at the phone number the reporter had given her. These people were offering her a chance to follow her dreams, but taking that chance might cost her the job she needed to survive. Sarah had to make a choice. She could play it safe and try to make Victoria happy, giving up on music forever. Or she could take a risk and see if her talent could really give her a better life. As Sarah sat at her desk, trying to decide what to do, she did not know that other people were already making choices that would affect her future. The video of her playing piano was still spreading across the internet. More reporters were trying to find out who she was. Music teachers and concert organizers were starting to ask questions about the mysterious young woman who had given such a beautiful performance. Whether Sarah was ready or not, her life was about to change in ways she could never have imagined. 3 days after Victoria's party, Sarah made a decision that scared her more than anything she had ever done. She called James Chun and agreed to meet with him about the musical opportunities he had mentioned. She also called the newspaper reporter and agreed to do the interview. Sarah met James at a small coffee shop near her apartment. He was waiting for her with a folder full of papers and a warm smile on his face. "I'm so glad you decided to call," James said as Sarah sat down across from him. "I've been thinking about your performance all week. I really believe you have something special." Sarah felt nervous but excited. "What exactly are you offering me?" James opened his folder and pulled out several sheets of paper. "I've spoken to some people I know in the classical music world. There are 3 main opportunities I think you should consider." The first opportunity was to audition for the City Symphony Orchestra. They were looking for a guest soloist for their spring concert series. If Sarah got the job, she would perform with professional musicians in front of thousands of people. The second opportunity was to make a recording of classical piano pieces. James knew a small record company that specialized in classical music. They were interested in working with new talent, especially someone with Sarah's emotional style of playing. The third opportunity was the most exciting and the most scary. A famous music school was hosting a competition for adult musicians who wanted to return to classical performance. The winner would get a full scholarship to study with some of the best piano teachers in the world. All of these opportunities could lead to a real career in music, James explained. But they would require a lot of time and practice. You would need to prepare several different pieces and perform them perfectly. Sarah looked at the papers in front of her. This was everything she had dreamed about when she was young. But she also thought about Victoria and her threats. "How much time would I need to prepare?" Sarah asked. "For the symphony audition, you would need about 6 weeks of serious practice. For the recording, maybe 2 months. The competition is in 4 months, so you would have more time to prepare for that." Sarah did some quick math in her head. 6 weeks meant practicing several hours every day after work. It meant spending money on sheet music and maybe taking some refresher lessons. It meant taking a big risk with no guarantee of success. "What if I'm not good enough?" Sarah asked. "What if I've been away from music too long?" James leaned forward and looked Sarah in the eyes. "I've been in this business for 30 years. I've heard thousands of musicians perform. What you did the other night was not just technically good, it was inspiring. You made people feel something. That's not a skill you can teach, and it's not something you lose." Sarah felt tears starting to form in her eyes. No one had talked to her about her musical talent with such respect and enthusiasm since her grandmother died. "I want to try," Sarah said quietly. "But I'm scared about my job." "My boss was not happy about what happened at the party." James nodded with understanding. "I know it's scary to take risks, but let me ask you something. If you don't try this now, will you regret it for the rest of your life?" Sarah knew the answer immediately. Yes, she would regret it forever. She would always wonder what might have happened if she had been brave enough to follow her dreams. "Okay," Sarah said, her voice getting stronger. "I want to audition for the Symphony orchestra. James smiled and shook her hand. Great. I'll set up the audition for 6 weeks from today. That gives you time to prepare, but not so much time that you'll lose your confidence. After her meeting with James, Sarah went home and called the newspaper reporter. She agreed to meet with him the next day to do the interview about her musical background and her performance at Victoria's party. The reporter, Michael Torres, was a kind man who made Sarah feel comfortable talking about her life. He asked about her grandmother Elena and her decision to study accounting instead of music. He wanted to know how it felt to give up her dreams and how it felt to rediscover them. It was like finding a part of myself that I thought was dead. Sarah told him, when I sat at that piano and started playing, it was like my grandmother was there with me, encouraging me to remember who I really am. Michael wrote down everything Sarah said. He was especially interested in how Victoria had tried to embarrass Sarah and how the plan had backfired. What do you want people to know about your story? Michael asked. Sarah thought for a moment. I want them to know that it's never too late to follow your dreams. I also want them to know that talent can come from anywhere. You don't have to be rich or go to fancy schools to have something valuable to offer the world. The newspaper article came out 3 days later. The headline read, Hidden Talent, Local Accountant's Musical Gift Discovered at Charity Event. The article told Sarah's whole story. From her childhood with Elena, to her decision to study accounting, to her surprise performance at Victoria's party. The article also included quotes from people who had been at the party. James Chun talked about Sarah's extraordinary talent. Several guests described how moved they had been by her performance. Even some of Victoria's friends admitted that they thought Victoria had been wrong to try to embarrass Sarah. The article quickly spread on. Social media. Local radio stations started talking about Sarah's story. A television news program asked if they could interview her. Sarah was becoming famous in her city as the accountant with the hidden musical gift, but with fame came problems. Victoria was furious about the newspaper article. She felt like it made her look bad and brought negative attention to her company. The day after the article came out, Victoria called Sarah into her office again. I told you I didn't want to hear any more about your piano playing, Victoria said angrily. But now there's an article about you in the newspaper, talking about what happened at my party. I didn't mention your name in the article, Sarah said, trying to defend herself. You didn't have to mention my name. Everyone knows it was my party. Now people are talking about how I tried to embarrass you. This makes me and my company look bad. Victoria stood up and walked around her desk. You have a choice to make, Sarah. You can be an accountant who works for me, or you can be a piano player who works for someone else. You cannot be both. Sarah felt her heart racing. This was the moment she had been afraid of. Victoria was forcing her to choose between her job and her music. Mrs. Whitmore, I've always done good work for you. My musical interests don't affect my job performance. They do when they embarrass me in public, Victoria shot back. I will not have my employees using my events to promote their own careers. Sarah realized that Victoria would never forgive her for making her look foolish at the party. No matter what Sarah did or said, Victoria would find ways to punish her. What exactly are you asking me to do? Sarah asked. I'm asking you to choose, Victoria said. Stop all this music nonsense and focus on your real job or find somewhere else to work. Sarah looked at Victoria's angry face and made a decision that surprised even herself. I choose music, Sarah said quietly but firmly. Victoria's mouth fell open. She had expected Sarah to beg for her job, not quit. What did you say? I said I choose music, Sarah repeated, her voice getting stronger. I quit. Sarah had never felt so scared and so free at the same time. She was giving up the financial security she had worked so hard to achieve. But she was also choosing to honor her grandmother's memory and her own dreams. Victoria was so shocked that she could not speak for several seconds. Then her face turned red with anger. Fine, Victoria said. Clean out your desk and leave. But don't come crawling back to me when you realize that playing piano doesn't pay the bills. Sarah walked out of Victoria's office with her head held high. Her coworkers stared as she packed up her few personal belongings from her desk. Some of them looked sad to see her go. Others looked scared, wondering if Victoria would take her anger out on them too. As Sarah carried her box of belongings to the elevator, Maria appeared beside her. The cleaning woman had tears in her eyes. "I'm proud of you," Maria whispered. "You're doing the right thing." That woman never deserved to have someone as good as you working for her. Sarah hugged Maria goodbye and walked out of Whitmore Industries for the last time. She had no idea how she would pay her rent or buy food. She had no idea she was good enough to make it in the music world. But for the first time in years, she felt like she was being true to herself. That night, Sarah sat at her grandmother's old piano and played for hours. She played all the songs Elena had taught her, and she played new songs that came from her heart. The music filled her small apartment and seemed to fill her soul as well. Sarah had taken the biggest risk of her life. Now she had to prove that her grandmother had been right, that her musical gift was worth any sacrifice. 6 months after Sarah quit her job at Whitmore Industries, she stood backstage at Lincoln Center in New York City. She was wearing a beautiful black dress that James Chun had helped her buy, and her hair was styled perfectly. In just a few minutes, she would walk onto one of the most famous stages in the world and perform for an audience of 2,000 people. The journey to this moment had not been easy. After leaving Victoria's company, Sarah had struggled to pay her bills. She had used her savings to take piano lessons with a professional teacher who helped her prepare for auditions. She had practiced 6 hours every day until her fingers were sore and her back ached from sitting at the piano. The first audition Sarah went to was for the City Symphony Orchestra. She was so nervous that her hands shook as she played. But when the music started, all her fear disappeared. She played a piece by Mozart that her grandmother had taught her, and she played it with all the love and emotion she felt for Elena's memory. The conductor of the orchestra was amazed by Sarah's performance. He offered her the job of guest soloist. Immediately, Sarah's first concert with the symphony was a huge success. The audience gave her 3 standing ovations, and the local newspaper called her a remarkable new talent. After that first concert, more opportunities came quickly. James Chun arranged for Sarah to make a recording of classical piano pieces. The recording was released by a small company, but it got excellent reviews from music critics. Radio stations started playing Sarah's music, and people began buying her recordings online. The biggest opportunity came when Sarah won the adult musician competition that James had told her about. Out of hundreds of applicants, Sarah was chosen as the winner. The prize was a full scholarship to study at one of the best music schools in the country. Sarah was torn about whether to accept the scholarship. She was finally making money from her music, and she did not want to give that up to go back to school. But James convinced her that studying with the best teachers would make her an even better musician. "You have natural talent," James told her. "But imagine what you could do with proper training and technique. You could become one of the great classical pianists of your generation." So Sarah moved to New York City to attend the music school. Living in New York was expensive and scary at first, but Sarah loved being surrounded by other serious musicians. She studied with teachers who had performed all over the world. She learned new pieces that challenged her in ways she had never been challenged before. Sarah's teachers were impressed by her dedication and her emotional connection to music. They said she had something that could not be taught, the ability to make people feel something when she played. With their help, Sarah learned to combine her natural gift with perfect technique. After 2 years of study, Sarah graduated from the music school with honors. By then, she was already performing regularly with orchestras in different cities. Music critics wrote glowing reviews of her concerts. Classical music lovers began to recognize her name and request her recordings. Tonight's concert at Lincoln Center was Sarah's biggest performance yet. She was the featured soloist with the New York Philharmonic, one of the most famous orchestras in the world. The concert was sold out, and there were music critics from major newspapers and magazines in the audience. As Sarah waited backstage, she thought about her grandmother Elena. Sarah wished Elena could be here to see this moment. Elena had sacrificed so much to give Sarah the gift of music. And now Sarah was about to perform on one of the most prestigious stages in the world. Sarah also thought about Victoria Whitmore. Sarah had heard from former co-workers that Victoria's company was not doing well. Several employees had quit after Sarah left, complaining about Victoria's treatment of workers. There had been articles in business magazines about problems at Whitmore Industries. Victoria's reputation in the business community had been damaged by the negative publicity, but Sarah did not feel angry toward Victoria anymore. In a strange way, Victoria had done Sarah a favor by forcing Sarah to choose. Between her job and her music, Victoria had pushed Sarah to take the risk that changed her life. If Victoria had not been so cruel at the charity party, Sarah might never have rediscovered her musical talent. 5 minutes, Miss Martinez, said a stage manager. Interrupting Sarah's thoughts, Sarah took a deep breath and looked at herself in the mirror one last time. She looked like a professional classical pianist now, but inside she still felt like the scared girl who had sat at her grandmother's old piano in a small apartment. Sarah walked to the side of the stage and listened to the orchestra warming up. The sound of all those instruments tuning together was one of her favorite sounds in the world. In a few minutes, she would join them to create something beautiful that would touch the hearts of everyone in the audience. The conductor appeared beside Sarah and smiled at her. "Are you ready?" he asked. "I'm ready," Sarah replied, and she meant it. Sarah walked onto the stage to thunderous applause. The audience rose to their feet before she had even played a single note. She had become famous enough that people were excited just to see her appear on stage. Sarah sat at the beautiful grand piano in the center of the stage. She adjusted the bench and placed her hands on the keys. The orchestra was silent, waiting for her to begin. The audience was silent too, holding their breath in anticipation. Sarah looked up at the balcony and imagined that her grandmother Elena was sitting there, watching with pride. Then Sarah began to play. The music that flowed from the piano was more beautiful than anything Sarah had ever played before. It was the same piece she had played at Victoria's party, Chopin's Ballade No. 1 in G minor, but now she played it with years of additional training and experience. Every note was perfect, but more than that, every note was filled with emotion and meaning. As Sarah played, she thought about her journey from the small apartment above the music store to this magnificent concert hall. She thought about her grandmother's love and sacrifice. She thought about the years she had spent hiding her talent, afraid to take risks. She thought about the moment she had chosen to be brave and follow her dreams. The music told all of these stories without using any words. The audience could hear Sarah's joy, her sadness, her hope, and her triumph in every phrase. When the last note faded away, there was a moment of complete silence. Then the audience exploded into applause that seemed to shake the building. People stood up and cheered. They threw flowers onto the stage. Some people in the audience were crying because the music had moved them so deeply. Sarah stood up and bowed, feeling overwhelmed by the response. After the concert, Sarah was surrounded by reporters and fans who wanted to talk to her. She signed autographs and posed for pictures. Music critics told her that her performance had been extraordinary. The conductor of the New York Philharmonic said he wanted to work with her again soon. Later that night, Sarah sat in her hotel room looking at reviews of the concert that were already appearing online. The critics were calling her performance breathtaking and unforgettable. One reviewer wrote, "Sarah Martinez has officially announced herself as one of the great classical pianists of our time." Sarah picked up her phone and called her parents, who were still living in the same small house where she had grown up. They had flown to New York to hear her perform, and they were more proud than they had ever been in their lives. "Mia, your grandmother would be so happy," her mother said through tears. "She always knew you were special." "I know, Mama," Sarah replied. "I can feel her with me every time I play." Over the next few months, Sarah's career continued to grow. She performed with orchestras all over the world. She made more recordings that became bestsellers in the classical music world. Music schools invited her to give master classes to their best students. Young pianists looked up to her as an inspiration. Sarah also started a scholarship program for young musicians from poor families. She remembered how hard it had been for her grandmother to pay for her music lessons, and she wanted to help other talented children who might not have the money for proper training. She called the program the Elena Martinez Scholarship. In honor of her grandmother, 1 year after her triumph at Lincoln Center, Sarah received an invitation that surprised her. She was asked to perform at a charity event for homeless children. The event was being organized by some of the same wealthy people who had been at Victoria's party 2 years earlier. Sarah almost said no when she learned that Victoria Whitmore would be attending the event. Sarah had moved on from her anger toward Victoria, but she was not sure she wanted to see her former boss again. But then Sarah remembered why she had started playing music in the first place. It was not about revenge or proving anyone wrong. It was about sharing beauty with the world and using her gift to make people's lives better. The charity event was raising money for children who needed help, and that was more important than Sarah's personal feelings. The charity event was held at the same hotel where Sarah had first met James Chun, but this time Sarah was not serving drinks or cleaning up. She was the featured performer, and everyone had come to hear her play. When Sarah arrived at the hotel, she was greeted like a celebrity. People asked for her autograph and wanted to take pictures with her.